So we haven't sat down for a minute. We skipped last week and yesterday. So that's mostly my fault. I've been behind on the editing and with all the planning for the con. We've just sort of stepped back a little bit until probably the end of the month with recording.
I don't think it has to be anyone's fault. It's okay. We are usually very regular.
It's all the fiber with consuming these books.
I eat these chapters after we finish a recording.
What do you think we do with them when we're done? We just tear them out of the books one page at a time and eat them.
This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Your hosts are Seth Jacobson and Patrick Heiler.
Hi, I'm Seth.
And I'm Patrick.
It's sitting down tonight to talk about Chapter 15 of The Fires of Heaven, What Can Be Learned in Dreams. And of course our symbol is the Flame of Tar Valon. Carefully, Nynaeve formed an image in her mind of the Amyrlin study, just as she envisioned the heart of the stone on going to sleep. Nothing happened, and she frowned. She should have been taken to the White Tower, to the room she had visualized. Trying again, she imagined a room there that she had visited much more often, if more unhappily. The heart of the stone became the study of the Mistress of Novices, a compact, dark-paneled room, full of plain, sturdy furnishings that had been used by generations of women who had held that office. When a novice's transgressions were such that extra hours of scrubbing floors or raking paths would not atone, it was here she was sent. For an accepted to receive that summons took a greater transgression, but she still went, on leaden feet, knowing the outcome would be just as painful, perhaps more so. Nynaeve did not want to look at the room. Shuriam had called her willfully stubborn on numerous visits, but found herself staring into the mirror on the wall, where novices and accepted had to look at their own weeping faces while listening to Shuriam lecture about obeying the rules or showing proper respect or whatever. Obeying others' rules and showing required respect had always tripped up Nynaeve, the faint remnants of guilt on the carved frames that had been there since the War of 100 Years, if not the breaking. I thought I'd leave it there, because after that it just kind of... We got like 2 paragraphs on clothing. Which is like... It's a common Nynaeve thing, but also... common Nynaeve introduction, but also World of Dreams introduction. So clothing will be like changing around. We also get... She thinks a little bit about the other dreamers and the Black Aja and the Tel'aran'rhiod and all that.
And the only thing I really want to point out is the fact that she can't get to the Amyrlin study because it doesn't look anything like she pictured it, because Elaida has taken over. And so this is the chapter where they realize that Siuan has been deposed and Elaida has taken over. There's just a lot of little clues sprinkled throughout the chapter where they're like, what's going on here? And it's like, yeah, Siuan's not the Amyrlin Seat anymore.
Right, we know because we've seen this from another perspective. And I feel like you've brought this up in the last couple of episodes, but I feel like a lot of the middle of this book is there's a good amount of recap. I'm just kind of agreeing with you, I guess, that we see this a lot where you see one event from multiple perspectives, and where you have to sort of painfully watch sometimes the characters realize what's happening around them, even though you already know.
Yeah. Or just put together 2 different character reactions to figure out what's actually going on. They don't necessarily tell you straight out, but it's like...
Right, and everybody's perspective is... So the facts from their perspective may be warped to their perspective. That's not a great way to say that, but I think you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think we're sitting with about 2 or 3 unreliable narrators who have their own perspective in mind, and we can really... The best way to figure out what Nynaeve is thinking is to see her through Egwene's perspective, and vice versa.
Yeah.
Because they always think themselves as doing no wrong.
Well, don't we all?
Yeah, but I'm right.
It's the world that's messed up, right? Not. Certainly couldn't be me. Nynaeve gives herself a little disguise that I thought was cute. She's wearing an acceptance dress and has Melane's face and hair.
Yeah. Which Egwene is like, Melaine would be pissed if she saw you wearing her face.
And of course she runs into Elaida, actual Elaida, who is in Tel'aran'rhiod for a few moments, who yells at Nynaeve for not bowing or kneeling or curtsying, I suppose.
Power-hungry Elaida. It's interesting that she did touch the dreams. We don't see that a lot with characters we know, right? I think that's the only time we ever see a character we know accidentally touch the world of dreams. We see a lot of sort of like NPCs touch the world of dreams and pop in and pop out for a second. And we see a lot of people who we know hanging out in Tel'aran'rhiod. But how often do we see someone we know accidentally dream themselves into the world of dreams? This might be the only example I can think of.
I think you're right. I can't think of any examples, of someone else we know popping into the world of dreams, but I feel like this is just kind of meant to hammer it in to Nynaeve.
That Elaida's Amyrlin?
Right, because then she turns the corner and walks into the study, and it's nothing like it was before.
I thought this line was interesting. As she passes by the mistress of the novices study, she goes, "A good many novice nightmares would contain Shiriam," as she sees like a nightmare with Shiriam in it. And I was like, I wonder if some of those are because she's Black Ajah and perhaps has tortured, I don't know. Maybe not. The novices wouldn't necessarily know she's Black Ajah, so it's a weak theory, but maybe the fact that she's evil contributes to the fact that she's in some of those nightmares. Just saying.
It could contribute, but like you just said, I mean, if the novices knew that Shiriam was Black Ajah, then other important people would certainly know before that.
Right. And we know the Black Ajah doesn't approach novices. But of course we've talked about this, that Shiriam's probably scouting the novices for those who would be amiable to being approached after they are raised to Aes Sedai.
She could use her position to vet, yeah. Nynaeve is noting all the differences in the room. And of course, we've seen this before in previous chapters, that Elaida's changed it substantially.
Right. And also that she looks at Lelane's desk and is like, that doesn't look like her, because it's now Alviarin's desk. So it's not that it's messy, but it's like, I would have thought she would have put her stuff away, So just little clues here and there that everything's a little bit different.
And then as Nynaeve walks, she's standing in the kind of entryway to the Amyrlin study, Egwene shows up. I had initially marked this all to read, Egwene berating Nynaeve, but I'm second-guessing myself now. I guess I should probably read it.
Well, before you dig into it, I just want to make the point that the reason that Egwene goes into this berating retort to Nynaeve is because Nynaeve looks at her and goes, "So, the wise ones have finally decided to let you come and go as you please." And they haven't. And so she is attempting to just override that question and never answer it. And that's how she gets into this weird, berating Nynaeve. It's totally, fright. It's her just talking as fast as she can to just try and change the subject and not let Nynaeve get a word in edgewise.
Throw Nynaeve off balance and kind of embarrass her, and then she later uses that to say, I won't tell anyone about this, but you should be smarter.
Yeah, and you better not tell anyone either. It's one of those situations.
Yeah.
She's constantly trying to make sure that Nynaeve isn't asking her in front of the wise ones, "Oh, so we met the other night,"
The door opened, and Nynaeve's heart leapt into her throat. A red-haired accepted she had never seen before stepped into the room and stared at her. She did not wink out of existence. Just as Nynaeve was preparing to leap back into Shiriam's study, the red-haired woman said, "Nynaeve, if Melaine knew you were using her face, she'd do more than put you in a child's dress." And just that suddenly she was Egwene, in her Aiel garb. "You nearly frightened 10 years out of me," Nynaeve muttered. "So the wise ones have finally decided to let you come and go as you please. Or is Melaine behind?" "You should be frightened," Egwene snapped, color rising in her cheeks. "You are a fool, Nynaeve. A child playing in the barn with a candle." Nynaeve gaped. Egwene? Berating her? "You listen to me, Egwene Alviar. I'll not take that from Melaine, and I won't take it. You had best take it from someone before you get yourself killed. I ought to take that stone ring away from you. I should have given it to Elaine and told her not to let you use it at all." "Told her not?" "Do you think Melaine was exaggerating?" Egwene said sternly, shaking her finger almost exactly like Melaine. "She was not, Nynaeve. The wise ones have told you the simple truth about Tel'aran'rhiod time and again, but you seem to think they're fools whistling in the high wind. You are supposed to be a grown woman, not a silly little child. I vow, whatever sense you once had in your head seems to have vanished like a puff of smoke. We'll find it, Nynaeve." She sniffed loudly, rearranging the shawl on her shoulders. "Right now you are trying to play with the pretty flames in the fireplace, too foolish to realize you might fall in." Nynaeve stared in amazement. They argued often enough, But Egwene had never ever tried to dress her down like a girl caught with her fingers in the honey jar. Never. The dress. It was the acceptance dress she was wearing, and someone else's face. She changed herself back to herself, in a good blue wool that she had often worn for circle meetings, and to put the council straight. She felt robed in all her old authority as wisdom. I am well aware how much I don't know, she said levelly, but those Aiel, do you realize you could dream yourself into something you could not get out of? Dreams are real here. If you let yourself drift into a fond dream, it could trap you. You'd trap yourself until you died. Will you... There are nightmares walking Tel'aran'rhiod, Nynaeve. Will you let me speak? Nynaeve barked. Or rather, she tried to bark it. There was rather too much frustrated pleading in there to suit her. Any at all would have been too much. No, I will not, Egwene said firmly. Not until you want to say something worth listening to. I said nightmares, and I meant nightmares, Nynaeve. When someone has a nightmare in Tel'aran'rhiod, it is real too, and sometimes it survives after the dreamer has gone. You just don't realize, do you? Suddenly, rough hands enveloped Nynaeve's arms. Her head whipped from side to side, eyes bulging. Two huge, ragged men lifted her into the air, face half-melted ruins of coarse flesh, drooling mouths full of sharp, yellowed teeth. She tried to make them vanish, but she can't. I don't want to go on too long because it goes a little further, but eventually Egwene relents and lets them drop her. But this is her supposedly teaching, as you were saying, Nynaeve a lesson about how dangerous it is here, when actually it's just her trying to put Nynaeve off her guard so she doesn't ask any questions.
And then there's that lie that's going on, that Nynaeve sort of has in the back of her head of
the fork root thing.
Yeah. Or no, yeah, that she says, oh yeah, I totally knew about fork root. And it's like, no, you didn't. No, you didn't. And it's bugging the hell out of her that she lied, She's basically that false pride. And here we sort of see Nynaeve really start to evolve personally. This is the first time that she really looks at herself and goes, I don't lie. Well, not about the big things.
And we see her grapple with it in her own mind a little bit at this point, where she kind of has a moment while she's talking to Egwene where she thinks, what's different? How is she running roughshod over me like this? And Nynaeve thinks that it's her own fault, that she used to, the force of her personality was stronger because her morality was aligned or something. She
and I think
was on a moral high horse.
Yeah, she talks about her old authority as wisdom. And, that basically what essentially has happened is she and Egwene have become equals in the White Tower. They're both accepted at this point. And so she has no authority over Egwene other than the authority of the wisdom of their village, which is really not a refuge anymore. And you can see her sort of try and retreat back to it here in a second when she puts on that blue wool dress and is like, I'm the wisdom, you should listen to me. And Egwene's like, I don't think so. You're fucking up, you're doing dangerous shit. And I know you're doing dangerous shit because the wise ones are telling me that when I do it, I'm doing dangerous shit. And I know you're just as reckless as I am, and I'm calling you out for it. Just to hide the fact that I shouldn't be here at all. So, it's a little bit of pot calling the kettle black, but it is a total shift in the power dynamic between the two of them, which only continues to shift as Egwene, rockets up to become the Amyrlin Seat. But yeah, there's a little bit of Egwene. This is where, both of these characters really do evolve during this period of time. Because Egwene's evolving from a spoiled little girl who wants to learn and will do anything to someone who has the heart of an Aiel and understands TFoH and, is willing to pay the price for the knowledge that she's getting and is, going through that transformation. So both of them are going from essentially young, spoiled, selfish people to much more mature people, and they're kind of doing it with each other, and it's happening through this inverse power relationship where both of them have to figure out exactly how to navigate this relationship. And it's fun. It's fun. It's just I love it. I don't know why it's such one of my favorite parts of these books is but actually seeing
the character development.
The character development.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. Oh, you like the character development, do you? Yeah, I love the character development. These books are my friends because I get to see these people grow up and become adults and, go through hard times together, but stay together and stay friends.
Yeah, and they're still flawed, even when I feel like some people do, most of our characters do reach some kind of adulthood, but, what does that even mean?
Right.
You know?
They confront their flaws, but they certainly never eliminate them entirely. I'm still gonna gamble and drink, even if
they're still people.
Right.
What she was doing hit Nynaeve like a sudden hammer between the eyes, excusing herself to Egwene, a girl whose bottom she had switched for throwing a tantrum not more than 2 years ago, and a moment earlier she had been proud as a hen with a new egg because Egwene was pleased with her. She remembered quite clearly the day when the balance between them had shifted, when they ceased being the wisdom and the girl who fetched when the wisdom said fetch, becoming instead just two women far from home. It seemed that the balance had shifted further, and she did not like it. She was going to have to do something to move it back where it belonged. That lie, she had deliberately lied to Egwene for the first time ever today. That was why her moral authority had vanished, why she was floundering around, unable to assert herself properly. I drank the tea, Egwene. She says, like, out of nowhere.
Just five minutes of silence, and then, I drank the tea.
Yeah.
I know.
She kind of stews in it as they then, Egwene has her initial dress down, and then they just kind of switch topics to what they're there and doing, which is going through Elaida's shit. I'm trying to figure out what's going on, find out any relevant information about what's happening in the wetlands in general.
And at this point, they still think it's Suon's study, and they're like, why is Suon redecorated? That doesn't make any sense. And they had this big argument about, no, the person who decorated this office looks at the world very differently than Suon looks at the world. They show the triptych with Rand and Bodwin conquering and that whole thing, which is Elaida's just...
Yeah, separately. It's a triptych of Bonwin.
That's right.
And just a picture of Rand on the side.
That's right. Threatening Rand. And it's that's not what Suon would be obsessed about.
No, right. Elaida gave us a little speech about why she hung the picture of Bonwin, who I think was one of the last Red Amyrlins.
Who was disgraced, which is why there haven't been Red Amyrlins since then. So it's
Right. Elaida hangs a picture on the wall to remind everyone what happened last time and to not mess this up, is the point. To remind them how failure is just around the corner.
It'd be like Trump hanging up a picture of Nixon in the office. To be don't screw it up like that guy did.
I mean, kind of, yeah.
Which is just kind of a weird way to look at the world, Look at the last person of your political party who really fucked up, and be put their big picture on the wall and be yeah, I don't want to be like them. Just remind me every day.
I get what she's trying to do, where, think about the last disaster and learn from those mistakes. So that makes sense to me, And, there's a little bit more to learning from history than understanding one single story of one single person. That's not really going to enlighten you on much. You got to understand the whole situation, Not just, this happened once, so don't do that. That's not a helpful way of solving a problem.
So you're telling me that not everything is a simple black and white answer?
That's right. Pretty much everything's gray.
I don't think I like that.
I mean, that's my personal philosophy.
You know what? You're
life.
Wrong, because I don't like it. And you can...
I did get us a little ahead, though, at the end of the Egwene's tirade. You mentioned they talk about how the room's different, and Nynaeve has the wherewithal to say Swan would never decorate this room this way. I kind of wanted to bring up, we see the 3 boxes on Elaida's desk. One is a writing box, which in the olden days had all the tools required to actually write something. And one is her little box full of miniatures, carved miniatures. That's mentioned a lot, and she, picks them up and holds them. I always thought this was a sort of weird little hobby that she has. Isn't it a bit strange?
Yeah,
I don't know.
She has knickknacks. It just sort of gives me an idea of her personality. She values items more than people. That she cares more about breaking her little ancient ivory fish than the suffering of the city. And it's just her priorities are all out of whack. That's sort of what I get from those little knickknacks and figurines that she's constantly handling and find valuable. Same thing with the roses, right? Like, it's not really a waste of power to have a rose in the winter, but, like, Elaida could be doing so much more with her power and attention than creating roses for her room that it's like, her priorities are just weird.
This is definitely a statement about her. And yes, and like all the... Nynaeve, I think, opens the box of figurines, and they're all, like, laid out in a precise way, where she, like, takes care of these things, and she, at some point, looks at the, there's, like, a plinth of some kind with a perfect white vase, and, like, flowers that are arranged, like, just the perfect red roses. There's something... I almost want to say, like, sterile and lifeless about her personality. Does that make sense? I'm not exactly sure what I'm trying to say here, but just that I feel like this reflects how she views the world.
Absolutely, it does.
In a way.
Yeah. And she thinks she's in control, right? She thinks she can set everybody up, make everything perfect, just move people the way she wants them to move. And when they don't do what she wants them to do, she has no idea how to deal with it because her world view is so rigid and framed and prepared.
Yes, it's a very tyrant-y thing, very tyrant-y idiosyncrasy where these people, you see it with politicians and other people in power too, but they're like, I feel like suddenly rise to a high office and they bark commands and expect everyone to jump, when in reality, you have to form relationships and figure out who the people are who work for you and what they're good at. And that's really how you actually lead a team, not just screaming at people. It doesn't work. It doesn't work long term. Then they just hate you, and yes.
Well, this chapter is all about characters, and I think we've gone into Egwene and Nynaeve, and it's fun to dig into Elaida's just total terribleness because she's...
Yeah, it's like she lacks a basic understanding of the world that I'm having trouble naming, but...
It's a selfishness. It's a taking reality and taking the facts and bending them to fit your worldview, no matter how much they actually contradict your worldview. And, like, it's not an evil thing to do, but it's something that we all see in ourselves and in people around us. That, like, if you're really self-aware, like... I caught myself doing this the other day when I, like, messed up at work, and I was like, yeah, well, but... And I was like, no, I'm just bending the facts to justify, like, why I was being lazy. But in my head, I had legitimate reasons, like...
Well, we're all really good at that.
And that's what makes Elaida so real, is that we all have that in us, and she's just that amped up. And we all know somebody like that.
Yeah, I heard someone say it's a wise quote a while back. I don't remember where it came from, but it was basically that as human beings, what we're really good at is justifying our actions, and they kind of told this story, like, if you ever, like, had to discipline a child and, they do something really stupid and you say, hey, Leah, what were you thinking? Why did you do that? And a little kid still kind of retains a certain natural forthrightness where they're like, little kids will say, I don't know why I did that. I just wanted to. Mm-hmm. And that is the actual truth. But you see, like, criminals in court or whatever, and they're like, oh, why'd you do that? And they come up with this whole elaborate story about why this had to happen. And and that really all that says is that we're just really good at telling ourselves stories, not that you necessarily had all that motivation to begin with, right? We're just children who are really good at justifying our actions.
Absolutely. And that brings me back to the split brain experiments, where, have you heard of these, where they, sometimes treat epilepsy, what they'll do is separate the two halves of your brain, basically cut it in half.
Yeah.
And then this leads to some interesting experiments where they can, hide things from your left eye and show it to your right eye. And because of the way, your vocal cords are only connected to one half of your brain and your handwriting is connected to the other half. And so if you show somebody's left eye something, they can write it down or, write a boot. Like, let's say you show them a picture of a boot and say, draw it, and their hand will draw a boot. And then you ask them, well, why'd you draw a boot? Well, the verbal part of their brain has no idea that the other part of their brain saw the boot. And so they'll come up with this story about how they heard a story this morning about the boot, and they were, thinking about a boot, and they decided to just go ahead and draw it. And it's like, oh my god, these people will come up with the most elaborate stories just because they aren't aware that their own brain just looked at a boot. And we do that constantly to ourselves. And also when you look at when you look at MRIs and look at brain reaction, our brain makes a decision and then we do something and that happens and then we justify it. Our brain, we always justify our decisions after they're already made in our own head. So, anyway.
So what we're saying is...
You have no free will.
Elaida has a disability and it's not her fault.
Yeah, it's called being human.
She should be cared for by older, wiser people. Until she can get her stuff together.
Do you want to go into the messages in the box? Because I think there's some interesting little tidbits as we go through the box.
I believe the first one is the Marshal General of Saldea and his army could not be found, and Queen Tenobia was refusing to cooperate.
And so we know that's, right, Bashir, Fail's father,
yeah.
And he's allied himself with the Dragon Reborn at this point, right? Or does that happen later?
Oh, they haven't talked yet.
They haven't talked yet. So where is Bashir's army? Does anyone have that off the top of their head?
He starts moving to look for the Dragon Reborn, and then I think gets in contact with other leaders of the Borderlands, and slowly this whole thing develops. And so in a year or two, there's this massive Borderlander army that comes to hunting the Dragon Reborn. Well, not hunting, but...
Oh, no, that's a different army, because...
That's many armies.
Yeah, but the Marshal General Saldea, Davram Bashir... He ends up getting scooped up by Rand, and he's not part of... So Bashir... Thank you, Sakan, that's where he is. Bashir is basically off the grid hunting Taim, was freed. Bashir is hunting Taim. So that's why he's disappeared. He's not part of that big army. And then, essentially, when Rand says, I've started my amnesty, you can't hunt him anymore, Bashir gets scooped up by Rand. And he's like, oh yeah, I'll totally... Tenobia is going to give you support right away. I just need to send a message. And then it's 9 months later, and Rand's like, haven't heard that support yet. Don't know what's going on there. So...
Oh yeah, I just looked this up, and apparently he was dispatched by Queen Tenobia. She told him to go hunt this Tame down. I suspect she doesn't want to tell anything to the Tower about it because they'll be offended. Basically, because the Tower messed up, Tenobia is trying to clean up their mess.
Well, and they just don't want... Taim basically tore their country apart once. They don't want it to happen again.
I am nodding. I'm looking more at this plot line.
A little bit about Jolene. And we know Jolene ends up actually in Ebu Dar with Teslin, and essentially gets captured by the Shanshan. And she's one of the two Aes Sedai that Matt sneaks out of Ebu Dar.
Oh, yeah, that's right. But we just see a little tidbit about her from a few chapters back.
She is in charge of hunting down Suon, and her failure to find Suon has led to her punishment, which leads to her essentially getting sent to Ebu Dar as ambassadors, which they didn't want to do. They're like, that's the middle of fucking nowhere. Ebu Dar is not important. This is the stupidest damn thing in the world. And then they get caught up in some Tiberan twisting. So, thanks, Matt. And then the little tidbit, no report had come from the Ajah's eyes and ears in Tanchico for 3 weeks. That's because I believe Tanchico has been overrun by Shanshan.
Yeah, after the riots. At some point it's overrun by Shanshan.
Some trouble between Ilian and Murandim. Patron Nile was claiming credit. I think that's him trying to just basically flex his muscles. And I know he has a plan, but it kind of all falls apart when he gets assassinated, so it doesn't really matter. Other than the fact that he's created a bunch of chaos on Almoth Plain.
Yeah, he's trying to basically take more land for the White Cloak nation, for lack of a better term, because it kind of is.
And as part of that, he's been really encouraging, shall we say, letting chaos rule, which is not good. But it sort of leaves this a power vacuum for Rand to step into.
He does this a time or two, or he creates a dangerous situation and then swoops in to put a stop to it and then takes the credit.
Right. Yeah, unfortunately, his dangerous situations get out of hand, especially when he's not there to control them. And then here's a really important line, the end of that paragraph, where it says she's looking through the box, and Nynaeve says she had just begun what seemed to be a report on a suspected gathering of Blue Sisters. And that when she reads that, she actually does see the word Saladar, but she spends all this time trying to remember what that report said.
Oh, yeah.
But that's one of those things where I was like, does it mention Saladar? No, it doesn't. So there's no way we could know. But she does see the word Saladar on that report, and she is constantly trying to remember for the next, I don't know, book and a half, where the hell are the Blue Sisters gathering? I know it as soon as I say it.
As Nynaeve is reading that report about possible movements of a possible gathering of members of the Blue Ajah, Egwene yells, "Oh, Light, no!" And Nynaeve comes charging out, thinking that she's being attacked or something. And she's just found a letter that was signed by Elaida du Amyrlin Rohan, or however you pronounce that. Watcher of the Seals, Flame of Tarvalon, the Amyrlin Seat, sealed with the seal. She realizes that Elaida has become the Amyrlin, and that's why everything's different.
And they find out that Moraine has basically a price on her head for treason. Again, not that it matters, because and that's one of the things that we see her react to and be like, no big deal, because she knows, we'll get to that point. She's not going to be around for that much longer.
Yeah. And I also liked that when Nynaeve realizes what's going on, Egwene explains, Nynaeve's stomach tried to flutter up into her chest. But how? What has happened to Swan? Egwene, the tower doesn't depose an Amyrlin except for something serious. Only 2 in nearly 3,000 years. Maybe Rand was serious enough. Egwene's voice was steady, though her eyes were still too wide. I just liked it because that's exactly what happened. The stuff with Rand was enough to at least get a lot of the tower to vote to still and execute Swan.
Yeah, the stuff with Rand and
only half successful.
The Black Ajah being willing to prop up Elaida and a few other little things that all came to, and the fact that they deposed her with the bare minimum. Yeah, they barely made it, but they made it. They got it. They made it. They got it done. Get her done, as the saying is.
Technically legal.
Except, obviously the problem with, as Egwene points out, doing it with the bare minimum means if anyone was Black Ajah or a Forsaken, then you could say it was an illegitimate vote, because their votes shouldn't count.
And we know there's a bunch of those in the room when that happened.
Yep.
Well, there's a bunch of those in, every room in the tower, but that's beside the point.
It's amazing how many Black Ajah there are. When it was all said and done, it's whoa, that is a lot.
Elaida. She's mean as a snake and cruel as a cat. There's no telling what she might do.
And this is how they figure out that the message from the Makura woman, as everyone calls her, where, all loyal sisters should return to the tower. It's the tower's split. That makes sense.
Yeah. And Egwene picks up this piece of paper and says, I've managed to read it all before she manages to read it all before it disappears. We haven't talked about that effect in Tel'aran'rhiod, but our listeners probably don't really need us to explain the mechanics of Tel'aran'rhiod too much. But because these reports aren't there permanently, then that means they're not there permanently in Tel'aran'rhiod either. These are in and out boxes that, these papers get shuffled around, so they're only there for a short time in Tel'aran'rhiod. All loyal sisters are required to report to the presence of the woman Moraine de Madrid. And then later they realize that she sent the same order about Elaine, and that's why Makura captured both of them.
Well, and as we know, the Elaine thing, the reason that Elaida has picked Elaine out is because of her foretelling about the House of Dragond being instrumental to the last battle, or the Royal House of Andor being instrumental to the last battle, which, and also, as we know, at the time of her foretelling, was Tigraine's family, Mantir. So it was, at the time, the Mantir line was the ruler, and as we know, Rand is pretty much the only one left. Rand and Galad.
Yep. I mean, both important.
To the last battle? Yeah.
Yeah.
Galad less so.
Well, of course.
He sort of took a shot at Demandred and failed.
And so the two women kind of put it together here that with the other message that Nynaeve heard about all loyal sisters should come back to the tower. Loyal sisters, Egwene, that fits the Makura woman's message. Whatever happened to Swan, the Ajas have split over Elaida as Amyrlin.
Yes, they have. And they let Rand know pretty quickly.
They put it all together.
Or she tells Moraine, and she tells Lan. Yeah, she tells Moraine, who tells Rand.
Gotcha.
I'm fairly certain. I mean, at that point, it just becomes common knowledge throughout the camp.
On the next page, I just had Nynaeve's morality conundrum that I already read about.
The lie.
The lie thing goes on for quite a bit. Nynaeve admits the lie because it's like eating at her.
I do really like Egwene's statement here. If you fell headfirst into a pigsty, you try and convince everybody you did it on purpose.
That's probably true.
That's Nynaeve. Like, she never tells the big lies, but if she's made a fool of, she'll be like, nope, meant to do that. Yep, totally meant to fall on my ass. Absolutely, that's what I was going for. Now move along.
And because they're in Tel'aran'rhiod, Egwene has the upper hand, so she tries to make Nynaeve drink one of her anti-lying concoctions that she used to make, like the people drink in
foul
Emond's Field.
Foul-tasting crap.
It's not medicine. It's just a gross herbal concoction that tastes terrible.
It's literally designed to just, like, make your mouth taste like crap for the longest period of time possible. And think about, like, drinking orange juice and after you're brushing your teeth for, like, hours. Just that...
I imagine it's worse
than well, you know. Really? I don't think anything's worse than that.
Although, of course, we don't recognize these ingredients. Boiled cat fern and powdered maven's leaf.
Anyone have a clue as to what are those real world plants? Are they made up? Is there other analogs? Something I've never really looked into is, you know,
doesn't click into anything that I know.
Did Jordan do his research on these, or did he just totally make up leaves? Or is he like saying like, oh, this is the equivalent of like, because we all know that like willow bark is basically aspirin, right? That's a pretty established fantasy thing. But are the other herbs equivalent?
And a in real life thing. Yeah, I don't know. If I had to guess, I would guess that cat fern is what we know as fox fern, but I don't know if you can eat that.
What's fox fern?
I'm trying to think of how to describe it. I can drop an image in Google. But it like the plant puts out, it looks like a tail. I'm going to drop this in Discord because I don't know how to describe it. Like a long, fluffy tendrils. Like this. I have one. Fox fern or foxtail fern.
I can see why they name it that.
Yeah. I don't know. I always sort of imagine the herbs and descriptions of plants are half real and half not. You know what I mean? When it's important, or if RJ wanted to make a cute quip, like as poisonous as a peach, then he could do that, but he can also just make up something, and you just have to imagine it.
You know what we need to do here for science, right? You've got to eat some of that.
Go through every
fern.
herb and
No. You just have to eat the foxtail fern and tell me if it tastes terrible, or if you die.
Foxtail fern is not edible. It is, however, closely related to asparagus.
Which one might say
in case anyone cares.
I mean, we do know there's very strong flavors in asparagus, so I could see that something related to asparagus could taste pretty foul.
It apparently can kill small animals, but not big ones.
Well, then you should be safe. You big animal, you.
It's true. Fairly large mammal. Right here. I like this little part. Egwene's reflections. Egwene's eyes popped open in near total darkness, broken only by a little moonlight streaming in through the smoke hole. She was glad to be under a pile of blankets. The fire was out, and freezing cold filled the tent. Her breath turned to mist in front of her face. Without raising her head, she scanned the interior. No wise ones. She was still alone. That was her biggest fear on these solitary excursions into Tel'aran'rhiod, returning to find Amis or one of the others waiting for her. Well, maybe not her biggest fear. The dangers in the world of dreams were every bit as great as she had told Nynaeve, but a big one nonetheless. It was not punishment that frightened her, not the sort that Bear doled out. Had she wakened to find a wise one staring at her, she would have accepted such gladly. But Amis had told her near the beginning that if she entered Tel'aran'rhiod without one of them accompanying her, they would send her away, refuse to teach her any longer. That made her quail far more than anything else they could do. But even so, she had to push ahead. As rapidly as they taught, they were not rapid enough. She wanted to know, now, to know everything. Channeling, she lit her lamp and put flames in the fire pit. Nothing remained for them to burn, but she tied the weave off. She lay there, watching her breath mist in front of her mouth, and waited for warmth enough to dress. It was late, but perhaps Moraine would still be awake. What had happened with Nynaeve still amazed her. I think she'd actually have drunk if I had pressed her about the Nynaeve, or about Egwene making the cup of lie juice. She had been so afraid that Nynaeve would learn that she certainly did not have the Wise One's permission to jaunt about in the world of dreams alone, so sure the flush of embarrassment had given her away, that all she could think of was keeping Nynaeve from speaking, keeping her from winkling out the truth. And she had been so sure Nynaeve would find out anyway, the woman was quite capable of turning her in and saying it was for her own good, that all she could do was talk, try to keep the focus on whatever Nynaeve was doing wrong. No matter how angry Nynaeve made her, she could not seem to bring up to a shout, and with all that, somehow, she had gained the upper hand. Come to think of it, Moraine seldom raised her voice, and when she did, she was least effective in having what she wanted done. It had been so even before she began behaving so strangely with Rand. The Wise Ones never yelled at anyone either, except each other, sometimes, and for all their grumping about the chiefs no longer listening, they still seemed to get their way more often than not. There was an old saying that she had heard and never really understood before. He strains to hear a whisper who refuses to hear a shout. She would not shout at Rand again. A quiet, firm, womanly voice. That was the thing. For that matter, she ought not to shout at Nynaeve either. She was a woman, not a girl throwing tantrums.
Aw, she's growing up.
Yeah, she's learning. She walks over to Moraine's tent. Oh, she walks over to Rand's tent first.
And sees him and Asmodean staying up late by themselves in what I assume is channeling lessons.
Yes, that's what they're doing alone at night. That's why Rand keeps them.
Mm-hmm. And that's why he's throwing everybody out. And Avienna's like, I don't know what they talk about, but they always throw me out. And it's like, well, they're learning to channel.
Yeah.
It's, everyone else is like, God, I don't know why he's like holed up with his gleeman all this time. He's so fucking vain to be like working on his personal story when he should be leading us. And it's like, no, he's learning how to channel.
The women don't know any of that, and Egwene asks Elaida, one of the maidens who's there, if he's still asleep. And Avienda appears out of the darkness, and they start making fun of Rand together. There's some cute quips, but Avienda says, I would sing him a lullaby if I thought it might work. I've heard of women being kept awake all night by an infant, but a grown man should know that others would like to have their blankets. She and Elaida shared a quiet chuckle. I get Aiel humor now.
Me too. That's pretty fucking funny. I was just going to say, Aiel humor is funny. I don't know why.
They're calling him a big baby
right.
that doesn't know how to take care of himself, so they have to do it.
I think the problem with Aiel humor is the first time you read through those books, you don't get the references, and you're like, I don't understand. I mean, in this example, it's not obvious, but there's some other ones where it's like, wait, what's a first sister again, and why is that funny?
Yeah, well, that makes sense. That, we can't get it all, but...
No, but the calling him a big baby and
some of the stuff I do get.
Sing him to sleep is, I think, cross-cultural.
Yeah, they make fun of him for a little bit. I also like that Elaida says, children are a great worry, I have heard. Elaida laughed, and son's the worst. You may find out the truth of this for me, now that you've given up the spear. And Avienda's like, shut up, this isn't funny anymore.
You may be having some babies with Rand.
And have we established, do we know if Avienda knows she's going to have kids? Yeah.
I think, God, she doesn't know for sure, but I think, it's that weird 3-ring thing where they know some things for sure and other things they just know when they need to know them. And it makes it very hard to know exactly what she knows and when, but she definitely knows she's going to end up with Rand. Here's a question before we move on. In Rand's tent, he says to Asmodean, take a look at page 287 and page 400 and tell me if you don't think that's a fine joke. And I think we find out what that joke is later on, but I don't have it in front of me. And I was curious if anyone here knows what he was referencing with those 2 pages. Oh, okay. I'm going to look for that while you do some reading.
Muttering to herself about Aiel humor, she almost never understood it, Egwene made her way to Moraine's tent, not far from Rand's. Here, too, there was a silver light, and she knew that the Aes Sedai was awake. Moraine was channeling, only tiny amounts of the power, but still enough for Egwene to sense. Lan lay sleeping nearby, wrapped in his warder's cloak. Except for his head and boots, the rest of him seemed part of the night. Gathering her cloak, she held up her skirts and tiptoed so as not to wake him. His breathing did not change, but something made her look at him again. Moonlight glinted on his eyes, open and watching her. Even as she turned her head, they closed again. Not another muscle stirred. He might never have awakened at all. Sometimes the man unnerved her. Whatever Nynaeve saw in him, she did not see. Kneeling beside the tent flap, she peered in. Moraine sat surrounded by the glow of Saidar, the small blue stone that usually hung on her forehead, dangling from her fingers in front of her face. It shone, adding a bit to the light of a single lamp. The fire pit held only ashes. Even the smell was gone. "May I come in?" She had to repeat herself before Moraine answered. "Of course." The light of Saidar faded away, and the Aes Sedai began fastening the golden chain back into her hair. "You were eavesdropping on Rand?" Egwene settled herself beside the other woman. It was as cold in the tent as it was outside. She channeled flames atop the ashes in the fire pit, and tied the flow. "You said he would not do it again." "I said that since the wise ones would watch his dreams, we should allow him some privacy. They have not asked again since he shut them out, and I have not offered. Remember that they have their own goals, which may not be those of the tower." As quickly as that, they had come to it. Egwene was still not sure how to tell what she knew without betraying herself to the wise ones, but perhaps the only method was just to tell it, and then feel her way. "Elaida is Amyrlin, Moraine. I do not know what has happened to Swan." "How do you know?" Moraine said quietly. "Did he learn something dream-walking? Or has your talent as a dreamer finally manifested itself?" That was her way out. Thought I'd just leave it there. I liked the thing with Lan, and I liked that Moraine accidentally fed her excuse for knowing what she is not supposed to know.
Well, you see Moraine there is eavesdropping on Rand and Asmodean doing lessons, like learning how to use the power, right?
Yeah.
So, she clearly at this point has to know that Asmodean is Asmodean, that Jason Natel is Asmodean.
Right.
That's clear from, and that's why she doesn't respond right away when Egwene walks in, and she's probably being holy shit, there's a Forsaken sitting in the tent with Rand. Yeah.
And I don't feel like this comes up all the time, but other Aes Sedai know how to do this trick. And I believe, although it's never explicitly stated, that Moraine does this all of the time. All the time.
Yeah, she's constantly listening to Rand.
Conversations that she's not actually present.
It's like her childhood trick that she uses frequently.
Right, because Moraine is technically a wilder.
Mm-hmm.
She started channeling by herself and then quickly was recognized and taken to the tower.
Yeah, and I was listening to New Spring, and she talks about how she sort of gave over one or two little tricks, but she kept this one for herself.
Yeah, I think she never has and never does teach it to anyone. Although she does do it in front of the wise ones at some point.
Sure. She shows other Aes Sedai how to do it. She certainly, Egwene learns the trick. No, now, I will say, one of the things she does is not everyone knows exactly how she can learn the gem, and she deliberately sort of obscures exactly what she can do, because it gives her a little bit of an aura of mystery. And because, at this time, she's one of the most powerful Aes Sedai out there, besides, Elaida and Suan and one or two others.
Yeah, man.
She can really...
If you've got a knife tucked in your boot, you don't want to tell your enemy, The whole point is that nobody really knows. There could be a knife in the boot. Maybe it's in the other boot. Who knows?
And they're like, we're pretty sure it's a knife, but it could be a gun.
Probably got a knife, but... Right.
There's something in your boot. We just don't know what it is.
Oh, we get a quick thing of Egwene's dreamer dreams. Because when Moraine mentions it, she thinks of the prophetic dreams that she's had recently. Although Egwene doesn't seem to demonstrate much skill, at least until later, in actually interpreting them. She does have the dreams and remember, but she often has no idea what they mean.
No, and that's one of the things I truly love about Jordan's storytelling is that he gives us all these clues, and the characters they're like, oh, whatever, it's a dream, it doesn't mean anything, or I don't understand. And we're totally like, ooh, foreshadowing. Tasty foreshadowing.
I've talked about this before, but Perrin's even worse, where sometimes he's in the dream and he has this crazy vision. He's just like, what the hell was that? And the chapter continues. He just doesn't...
At least Egwene acknowledges...
Weird world of dreams.
She's like, oh yeah, those dreams probably mean something, but I have no idea what. But at least she acknowledges that they mean something. Perrin's just like, oh, I saw some heads in the sky. Oh well.
What is this? Yeah. Which you can't really blame him.
No, the wolf dream is weird.
She sees Rand sitting in a chair that belongs to a woman, and she'll be mad if she finds out. It's Rand and Elaine.
Right, so him sitting
Perrin with Fael.
The throne of Andor.
Yeah. Perrin and Fael hanging out. She sees the Red Wolf, the Crimson Eagle.
I don't think that needs a lot of explanation.
Yeah, no. And a man in a bright yellow coat stood near to Perrin's shoulder. She knew that he was a tinker. I'm skimming through for
That's
the
Aram,
important
clearly.
lines here, but yeah. And every time he moved closer to Perrin, it was as if a chill of doom shot through everything.
Clearly some foreshadowing for him turning evil and trying to kill Perrin. And, that would have been nice to know for Perrin a little bit earlier. Watch out for a tinker, maybe?
Yeah.
Warn him a little bit?
And then Matt and Tom, it looks like.
After they...
Matt throwing dice with blood streaming down his face. His hat is in a position that she can't see that his eye's been pulled out, but that's what I imagine.
Mm-hmm. And Tom pulling Moraine out of a fire. And that comes literally true. He reaches into, like, steaming hot, or whatever, hot steam, and to pull her out of that column and burns his hands. So he literally puts his hands into fire to pull her out. Like, that's about as literal of a foretelling as I think you can get.
She dreams... Tom Amyrlin put his hand into a fire to draw out the small blue stone that now dangled on Moraine's forehead, which just represents her, the little blue stone. And then a dream of a storm, which I think is probably just like the Dark One.
Yeah, the last battle. We see that, like, terrible storm that hangs over everything with no rain.
Nynaeve's storm is coming, yeah.
It's just a consistent analogy for the Dark One and evil throughout the entire series.
Egwene tells Moraine that she saw the arrest warrant and that Swan is probably stilled or executed or both. And Moraine just says, the wheel weaves as the wheel wills. Perhaps it will not matter so much if Rand takes the Aiel across the Dragon Wall. And Egwene's just like, what? That's all you have to say?
and she keeps bringing the Dragon Wall up again, and the Alguenya, which is the river of the docks in which the whole confrontation with Lanfear happens. So she's basically like, yeah, it sucks that she's dying, but guess what? I'm pretty much dead too, so...
Not really worried about getting arrested.
not really going to be a big deal. Because, like, if we cross the Dragon Wall, basically, I'm peace out. Like, either way, like, they're not going to get a chance to get to me, because either I'm going to stay in the waste where they can't get to me, or we cross over and I'm peacing out through the door with the gateway.
Totally. And reading those lines has convinced me even further that not just that Moraine knows that she's marching to her death, but that she, or her possible death, but that all her efforts to get Rand to not cross the Dragon Wall with all of the Aiel are all centered around these visions that she's seen in any of various places of what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. I think it's all centered around... if Rand takes the Aiel across the Dragon Wall in this manner at this time, then this will happen.
Exactly. And your only choice will be to sacrifice yourself to stop Lanfear.
Take Lanfear on the way out. Yeah. Or die. And I also speculate, because I don't have much evidence to back it up, that Moraine also knows that if she doesn't remove Lanfear from the picture, then Lanfear will eventually win Rand over one way or another.
Well, she talks in the letter about the 3 pathways, right? From that one event, right? Either she does what she does, pathway 1, or Lanfear kills Rand, pathway 2, or Lanfear takes Rand away, and when he comes back, he answers to Lewis Theron and worships Lanfear and the Dark One and stands by her side. So if he crosses the Dragon Wall with the Aiel, she knows there are only 3 possibilities, and the only one that she can possibly tolerate is essentially her own potential death. And she's not sure that she can be rescued, right? In her letter, she says, there's a potential for me to be rescued. I know I can be rescued, but there's no guarantee that it will happen, even if the 3 of you come for me.
Right. She may very well be dead by the time they get there.
Or they'll fail, and then she'll be dead anyway.
Yeah.
So she's not sure that she gets to come back from this. She knows it's a possibility, but I think she thinks it's fairly remote.
And, of course, Moraine says none of that at this point.
Of course, Moraine says none of that is pretty much the sum of her character.
She does talk about fate a little, and she says, Swan and I were friends once. In a few months, it will be 21 years since we began the search for the Dragon Reborn. Only the 2 of us. And she goes on later, and I thought this was a good line. There's a saying in Cairhien, though I have heard it as far away as Terabon and Saldea. Take what you want and pay for it. Swan and I took the path we wanted. and we knew we would have to pay for it eventually. So she's like, yeah, stuff's blown up in our faces, but we always knew that was going to happen eventually. This wasn't ideal way for it to happen, but of course something happened.
And I think that you've got her talking about Suan, but also very much talking about herself.
Herself, yeah.
And that's easy to miss. You can be like, it feels very callous as she's talking about her best friend, but she's actually really talking more about her own experience that's coming.
Yeah. She thinks Swan is probably dead, but Moraine also believes that she won't outlive her very long. Like, it's not going to be long now before she's dead, too.
Also, coming up is the 21st anniversary of the search, which also means it's Rand's 21st birthday.
Yeah.
In a few months, yeah. Well, and just Moraine's reaction, as she's checking out, Egwene's like, aren't you excited that the tower split? Because now one faction's going to support Rand. And she's like, not really. The tower split is not a good thing. And Egwene eventually takes that to heart and really understands that the tower needs to be united. But this is the first time where she's like, right now, at this point, she believes she's happy that the tower split because then one side will support Rand.
Yeah, I mean, I understand both of their perspectives, where Egwene's saying, well, I mean, this whole split was over Rand, so the people that aren't with Elaida may very well support Rand, and that's a good thing. And Moraine's like, not really, dude. It's the tower's fighting amongst itself. That's always a bad thing.
And, as we find out, deliberately orchestrated by the Black Ajah and the Forsaken. So, yeah, not a good thing.
I know you're not giving up, Moraine. What do you mean to do? I mean to deal with the world as I find the world, for as long as I can. At least Rand will be easier to be around, now that I no longer need to try to turn him from what he wants. I suppose I should be happy that he does not make me fetch his wine. He does listen most of the time, even if he seldom gives any sign what he thinks of what I tell him. I will leave you to tell him about Swan in the tower, Egwene says. That would avoid awkward questions. With Rand as big-headed as he was, he might want to know more about her dreaming than she could invent. There's something else. Nynaeve has seen Forsaken in Tel'aran'rhiod. She mentioned every last one still alive except Asmodean and Mongedion, including Lanfear. She thinks they are plotting something, perhaps together. Lanfear, Moraine said after a moment.
Ding, ding.
They both knew that Lanfear had visited Rand in Tyr, and maybe other times, that he had not told them of. No one had much knowledge of the Forsaken except the Forsaken themselves. Only fragments of fragments remained in the tower, but it was known that Lanfear had loved Luce Theron Telamon. They too, and Rand, knew she still did. With luck, the Aes Sedai went on, we will not have to worry about Lanfear. The others Nynaeve saw are another matter. You and I must keep as close a watch as we can. I wish more of the wise ones could channel. She gave a small laugh. But I might as well wish they were all tower-trained while I am about it, or to live forever. They may be strong in many ways, but they are sadly lacking in others. A watch is all very well, but what else? If 6 Forsaken come at him together, he will need every bit of help we can give. Moraine leaned over and put a hand on her arm, a look of affection on her face. We cannot hold his hand forever, Egwene. He has learned to walk. He is learning to run. We can only hope he learns before his enemies catch him. And, of course, continue to advise him, to guide him when we can. Straightening, she stretched, and stifled a small yawn behind her hand. It is late, Egwene, and I expect Rand will have us breaking camp in a very few hours now, even if he gets no sleep at all. I, however, would like to take what rest I can before facing my saddle. Egwene made ready to go, but first she had a question. Moraine, why have you started doing everything Rand tells you to? Even Nynaeve doesn't think it is right. She does not, does she? Moraine murmured. She will be Aes Sedai yet, whatever she wishes. Why? Because I remembered how to control Saidar. After a moment, Egwene nodded. To control Saidar, first you had to surrender to it. It was not until she was shivering her way back to her own tent that she realized Moraine had spoken to her the whole time as an equal. Perhaps she was closer to being ready to choose her Ajah than she thought.
Well, considering she's going to be Amyrlin in a couple of weeks, yeah. And skip right past that.
I really enjoyed that.
That's
conversation between the two of them.
So good, yeah. I'm glad you read that whole thing.
That's a little gem right there.
With luck, we won't have to worry about Lanfear, because she already knows what's going to happen with Lanfear.
Right. And Moraine makes a comment about it several times. She's like, Lanfear I don't think we're going to have to worry about, but the other ones.
Yeah. Lanfear, I think what's going on there.
Keep an eye out for them.
And she is. She's like, we can't hold his hand forever because I'm going to be out of the picture here in a couple of weeks. Like, it's all of these clues that she's dropping left and right about knowing that she's not going to be around.
I like that Sakan's pointing out that Egwene never does choose an Ajah.
No, she skips right past that. She just goes right to Amyrlin of all Ajahs and none. Which is, Egwene is the perfect Amyrlin, right? We see her have aspects of all the different Ajahs. We see her be a diplomat. We see her go to war. We see her use logic. That's the whole point of her being this sort of apprentice in the tower. Is she goes to the different Ajahs and basically schools them in their own method of thought. And that's like, and then she comes from all Ajahs, but also none because she was raised as an accepted.
Yeah.
And to be honest, like I don't know what Ajah I would have picked for her.
I don't know.
I think I talked recently about how I think that Elaine should have picked gray, not green.
Yeah.
As a politician, someone in politics, I think gray would be perfect for her. And I often wonder if maybe Egwene wouldn't have been like, gosh, I almost want to say like a white with her logic and like...
Oh, I feel like she's blue. Yeah. Of course we'll never know, but I feel like she's... Maybe not. Green or blue? But also, this is already buried, but I just wanted to answer Doom Trimmer's question. I think not everyone knows about Balefire killing someone forever, but Moraine does. She just tried to lecture Rand about it in a few chapters back. When he kills the Dark Hounds.
I always want to make the correction about Balefire. It doesn't take someone out of the pattern forever, right? They still get to be reborn with a different mind. Yeah, totally. This is one of those weird things about Balefire is like, okay, when you have
it burns the thread back through time, so I suppose that means they still exist in the past.
Exactly. It just, it shifts the moment of death back in time, but that doesn't mean that the thread is burned from existence. Just like when your thread is cut, it's not in the pattern anymore, it's just cut at the time of death. Whereas with Balefire, instead of cutting it, you're basically taking a lighter to it, and it just burns back a little bit. Yeah. And the DO can only grab you during the transition, but if you've been dead for a bit, you've already done that transition to the afterlife or whatever you want to. Right. The space in Tel'aran'rhiod where souls that aren't Heroes of the Horn, wherever they go.
So just the person that you were can't come back, but your soul
is not destroyed.
Is not gone forever. Just your body and your
as we split this into mind, body, soul, as a way to talk about it, and your mind and your body are destroyed, but the soul still exists. For example, if Brigida had been burned out of the pattern in one of her past lives by Balefire, she could still be reborn as Brigida, and could still be bound to the horn. Yeah, I use the mind, body, spirit thing for Sanderson a lot as well. He makes it much more explicit in terms of like having a cognitive realm, having a spiritual realm, and having a physical realm. But with Jordan, it's been convenient because, when the DO resurrects someone, he resurrects their mind and spirit into a new body. When the pattern brings somebody back, the pattern resurrects your spirit into a new body and a new mind. And what makes Rand unique is that he has access to... It's the same spirit, and he has access to two minds, even though it's the same person. So he has the knowledge of two minds, but he doesn't, it's that Rand and Lewis Theron are the same person. They have the same spirit, even though they have different knowledge. And when I say mind, mostly I mean like the knowledge that you've acquired. For example, if Asmodean was reborn, he'd still probably be a little bit of a selfish kind of person. It's just like you're still the same person, but your upbringing can change you. Your mind can be different, even if your spirit's the same. And I think that concept of rebirth is so central to the Wheel of Time because it's central to Rand's decision-making in terms of keeping the wheel going. It's saying, hey, we can be reborn into a new body, into a new mind, and we can do better. We can love. We can improve ourselves. We can always try and be doing better. So those are sort of the different... it's a convenient way to talk about how the rebirth works, and I do think that it's helped me clarify exactly what's going on. By the way, does anyone ever, I was just thinking about this last night, and I'm not sure if this ever occurred to me before, but the Dark One in Shale Ghul must be able to switch spirits and minds into new bodies, right? That's how he creates Arengar and Aaron, the Gars. And also Moradin, awesome, right? He takes spirits and puts them into a body, and that's something that happens at Shale Ghul.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, that's exactly what happens to Rand after the last battle. He's in Shale Ghul, and the spirit and mind switches bodies. So we know that it happens.
Also, since we're on the topic, and I'm just looking back at the Discord chat, it's what Kelsier does at some point. Inhabits a new body.
Yeah, there's some debate as to whether it's a Khandra, whether he's just inhabiting a Mist Wraith body, or if it's some person. We'll find out.
And that's, for anyone that doesn't know, Kelsier from the Mistborn series, part of the Sanderson's Cosmere. I just saw someone mentioning that Lumen saying there are times when I'm reading where I can definitely see places where Jordan influenced Sanderson. That got me thinking. I was like, you could say that there's a lot of parallels in there.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?